Welcome to the April edition of the Cinetopia radio show and podcast. I'm Amanda, your host, and on this show we review 3 films coming out in UK cinemas shortly. First off is Sebastian, directed by Mikko Mäkelä. We also sit down with Mikko to talk about his film on this show. We also review Four Mothers, directed by Darren Thorton, currently out in cinemas right now. And finally, we review the new documentary Desire, the Carl Craig story about the legendary Detroit DJ, coming out in theaters on the 8th of May. All on this show, so stay tuned. This month, Cinetopia is all over the UK with its UK tour of Kim's Video, the documentary that follows modern-day cinephile and filmmaker David Redman on a seemingly quixotic quest to track down the whereabouts of a massive video collection of the now defunct and legendary Kim's Video, an iconic New York City video rental store with more than 55,000 beloved and rare movies. Check out all our screenings on our website, including on the 25th of April when we'll be in Dundee, which is on our Kim's Video tour page. Next, on Monday, the 21st of April, we have our next Doc Club screening. To mark Earth Day 2025, Cinetopia Doc is proud to host the UK premiere of The White House Effect, a revelatory journey through a pivotal moment in the history of the climate crisis. Using exclusively archived footage as narrative, The White House Effect transports viewers back to 1998 to 1992, when the world stood at a crossroads in addressing global warming. Finally, subscribe to our new Substack, Cinetopia Recommends, where we list all the events and opportunities for film lovers and filmmakers around Scotland, particularly Edinburgh and Glasgow. Find out how to subscribe on our website at cinetopia.co.uk. And if you have an event and want it listed, we have a submission form, so let us know and we'll share it with our growing film community here. Okay, and welcome to our April edition of the Cinetopia radio show and podcast. And I'm here with one regular and one new person to join us today. So we're here with Rosie Beattie. Rosie, how are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great. And we're back with Kat, one of our regulars. Kat, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. How are you, Amanda?
Great. It's a super sunny weekend, so probably we're not mostly in, although I did find myself in the Cameo bar last night, so like just can't get myself out of cinemas. That's just my life. But Rosie, tell us a little bit about your work, and I know you've been around the film exhibition scene for a while in Scotland, so just give us a little bit of an overview of what brings you here.
Yeah, so I'm a freelance film programmer and event producer. I'm currently the curator and producer of Queer Cinema Sundays, which is a monthly film program at the GFT. It runs on the last Sunday of every month, and it's a chance to explore the history and catalogue of LGBT cinema with a shared audience. So that's been running for April will be 12 months, so it's a year now. We've shown lots and lots of different titles and had some really great audiences in for that. So yeah, we're going to keep going. The next screening is on the 27th of April. It's Caravaggio. So if you're in Glasgow and want to see that beautiful film on the big screen, please do come along. Yeah, I always introduce the films. I love chatting to the audiences after. So that's been definitely my passion project for the last year or so.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And we're really looking forward to our chat today and going forward. And one film we'll be talking about. You did a intro and Q&A, right, with the filmmaker in Glasgow as well. And I'm always just looking at what is on programs like yours at Glasgow and feeling quite jealous that you have such good programs going on there. But yeah, we'll get over there as much as possible. But yes, and Kat, how are you doing? How's your film watching been going? I know you have lots of personal activity happening right now, but how have you been for the past couple of months?
Yeah, good. I've just been focusing on kind of coming of age films because that's really relevant to my PhD that I'm doing. But I've been really
into the kind of mumblecore movement of the kind
Mm.
of early 2000s and enjoying a few films from there. So I watched Nights and Weekends. That was the debut by Greta Gerwig, and another one, Hannah Takes the Stairs. And Gerwig basically stars in all of them, and they've been really great. I wasn't entirely sure if that would be my cup of tea, but I really enjoy the kind of realistic um way of filmmaking, I guess, and that kind of early 2000s vibe as well. It just kind of takes you back, and it's quite nice. So that's been really good.
Yeah, well, we should talk about an offline which your favorites are because I'm obsessed with doing stuff more on mumblecore and also a little Greta Fest maybe in the future of some sorts. But yeah, so yeah, well, thank you both for joining. And today we're going to talk about three films, and the first one is Sebastian by Mikko Mäkelä.
Tell me about yourself.
What would you like to know?
Well, I don't know, just the basics. Where you from? What do you do in life?
I have to say, I wasn't thrilled when you said you were writing about sex work. I'm sure you're aware there's no shortage on the topic, but I think it is alive, really intimate. It would be fantastic if we can get your debut novel published already next year. Have you thought about setting it in the first person?
Aye. Come on in.
You're new to this, aren't you?
You've got that wholesome boy next door thing going on.
You know, there's not much money in writing fiction.
But is it really just about the money for you?
It's not that simple.
Rosie, you want to tell us about this film?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting film. It stars Rory Mollica. He plays a young man living in London. He's moved there from Edinburgh, and he's sort of up and coming writer, in a very competitive scene. And he moonlights as a sex worker in the evenings, through this online app and this online persona that he uses. His real name's Max, but he uses this alias, Sebastian, to meet his clients. His clients tend to be older gentlemen, that he's sort of keeping company. It's a really interesting exploration of like queer sex work in the digital era and the idea of sex work as a side hustle. I think, I think Miko has done a really interesting job at exploring that theme, and yeah, I think that sort of sums up what the film's about, without getting too much into it if you've not seen it.
And Kat, what did you think of
I had a weird, I don't know if it's just because there is so much stuff going on at the minute for me that I really had a tough time with these films this week. Um, because I think I've been watching a lot of stuff that I really enjoy, and perhaps, I don't know, not particularly with this one, but with the other films, they're just not they don't quite slot into what I enjoy. So I think I was in a not the best of moods when watching this one. So I think it was the best one of the three, and that really makes you think and it really makes you reflect, and it's a very kind of um slow and kind of deep kind of way of exploring this topic rather than kind of going kind of gung ho into it, which I quite enjoyed, and I think the performances were really what made it. Um, is it Rory Mollica? Is that right? He did a
Yeah.
fantastic job, I think as the kind of main actor, and the way that he carries the entire film is just incredible. So yeah, really really interesting thing to watch, and I did watch a few interviews with the director as well, and it just seems like he'll probably be one of those people who you will be kind of seeing in the next few years, and as they kind of make more films. So yeah, really, really exciting. I do have a few cons, but we can maybe get to that a bit later. Let's focus on the positive first.
Yeah, hold those thoughts. But Rosie, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. I should have said in the sort of synopsis that Max is also he's writing about these experiences, and he's working on a debut novel, but he's drawn from his own experiences. So there's this really interesting relationship between like life imitating art and what it's like to be a sort of young up and coming creative person. He's sort of always up against his reality and what he wants to write about, and this sort of persona that he needs to come across to be brandable, essentially. And I think one of my favorite themes throughout it was this relationship between um, branding yourself as a young creative and sex work. Because I think what the director does is he makes those things not particularly like dissimilar. There's a scene where he's at a very like high end networking event for with publishers, and he's been sort of paraded around a little bit like a show dog, like he's like this new discovery, and it's quite escorty in some ways. So I thought that was really interesting, and I also really liked the intergenerational dialogue that goes on. One of the most interesting relationships in the film, in my opinion, is one that he forms with an older man called Nicholas. And a sort of very intimate relationship forms between those two men. You know, Max is, I think he's maybe only meant to be 24, 25, and Nicholas a much older man. And you don't often see those intergenerational dialogues between queer characters. So I thought that was something the film did really well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go more with Rosie's side. I really enjoyed this film, but I also think, Kat, sorry, I think almost all these films are the kinds of films I like. So I feel like it's something where I'm interested in some in this new. I'm interested in films that are discussing empathetically the sex working industry. I also was thinking a little bit when I was watching this about Pleasure, which was about the porn industry in LA, but sort of in this sort of, like I said again, an empathetic way. So it made me curious to watch the film, but then it's just so different the way it's put together. And I think, like you said, Rosie, this intimacy between the Max Sebastian character and Nicholas, the older man who fall within the same, that that he's sort of he could be a mentor in this, in this inner world of publishing and writing, and yet they share this very like intimate relationship that I think was so I think it was just so elegantly portrayed on cinema for me, and I just really felt that connection between those two people, and I think it really yeah, it was special for me. And I think the other thing I really liked about it was just how it was just so beautifully shot, but it was taking you into these inner worlds of London nightlife, which, I mean, again, I'm pulling the things like industry. I spent a weekend, like binging industry, but this is done in such an elegant way, but it also a really like you sort of got into the vibe of London nightlife, but then also the London queer culture of like, and then sex working, and then this inner work of like the publishing world, which feels very like stingy and scary, and so all of them felt like quite interesting perspectives on worlds I don't know about, but I thought was really well. It was really I think it was also really well written. I think there was so many different themes in terms of what he talks about. I know I'm sure he did in your Q&A, and he will when we talk about authorship and who's the right person to write a story, and but also yeah, like about the gig economy too, where he was this person who needed in some ways, but also chose this line of work. So Kat and I talked about Honora, and I think this one is just more empathetic in terms of like the conversation around it. Even though I liked Honora, I must admit I liked it for different reasons. But I just thought this was a really, really interesting film about these subjects.
I think what was really interesting there as well was the kind of, and I think the director mentioned this in one of the interviews, that he was kind of looking at the subjectivity of Max and what he's kind of going through, and I think that worked really well in that, like, everything you saw was kind of from his perspective, like the entire time. But then I think there were just moments that I thought were a bit stiff, or maybe what took me out of the kind of, being in, as you were just describing, Amanda, like being, in that kind of London nightlife or the kind of publishing world and stuff. For some reason, that stuff felt really unrealistic to me. Like, it didn't quite convince me that that was the reality of it. But I think upon reflection, it's one of those things where maybe you think that, because it's a film about sex work, it should be more edgy, or it should be more underground, or it should, be something. And so in a way, I think that, and I think what we do, or what this kind of podcast or show worked quite well on, is kind of you reflecting back on these films and then being like, oh, actually, maybe when I was watching it, I felt one way, but now looking back, it's making me think about it in a different way and makes me appreciate the film more. And I think that's what's kind of happening right now. But yeah, and I thought with Max, he was such a reserved character as well. Like, it was just so nice to kind of just spend that time with him throughout the film, and see his kind of gentleness, and especially with Nicholas, as you were saying, that relationship is so special and kind of gentle and in a way, and vulnerable, that then you don't really see that a lot, I guess. So yeah, a lot of kind of different, directions that I think the film was kind of going in, and covering different topics from different perspectives. Not necessarily. Let's just cut that line. I don't know where that's at.
No, that's good. And you, Rosie, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one of the things I really liked about the film was its frankness towards sex and sexuality. I think it's still a very hot topic in film just now, like the sex
Yeah.
scene. Do we need it? Do we not need it? And there's definitely some really interesting literature and essays and things coming out just now about that. But it's a very, very frank film about sex and queer sex, and I think it works really well. And I think I really liked as well that there's lots of different characters that Max or Sebastian meets, and I'm not going to say it's a body positive film. I think it's more like it's body neutrality. I don't think it doesn't although it's sort of, I think the film does comment on, there's a sort of body image culture, especially in the gay male community, about looking a certain way and being like very muscly and toned. That's not the reality of all the men that Sebastian meets. He meets lots of different men with different body types, and I don't think the film is necessarily commenting on that in like a large way. I just like the way it's shot, and you see all these different body types and ages, and I just think that's really interesting, and you don't
Yeah.
see it very often.
Yeah. And I think that there was, to me, this this important theme of shame, and, almost this living, of course he lives a double life, but, this sort of thing about sex and shame. Yeah, again, also I liked Baby Girl, and I think there was a little bit of that in Baby Girl, in terms of, where and how you connect with a specific people, or what's needed is maybe something that you didn't, yeah, you can't fully express or haven't fully expressed in other parts of your life. So I just thought it just handled these themes around sex so effectively, for me, in a world maybe I don't know, but I think it really, like, it resonated. So I also just thought it, like I said, I think it really was beautiful, and it was like a beautiful film. And I think it, like, I like when I say that word elegant, I think it just makes me, like, when I watch the whole thing, I just love the whole, like, ambiance of the film, and what it exudes, from the writing to everything. So really happy to have seen this film. And yeah, so Kat, you said a couple cons. Do you have some cons, or did you already say that?
Yeah, I think it was mostly the kind of as I already mentioned, the kind of the nightlife perhaps, but also I think most of the pretentiousness of the publishing world, and how it was constructed in a way to clearly be pretentious and be this thing. But I think it was maybe doing it in a way that was a bit too much, to a point where I was like, this feels very film like, in that I feel like it's unreachable in a way, you know what I mean? Where you kind of feel like, surely people like that don't exist. And I think even the dialogue in those kind of scenes didn't feel as natural as maybe I would expect, in comparison, again, to the vulnerability and the intimacy that you get in the sex scenes, for instance. So I just thought that was a bit of a shame for me anyway. And then I think equally the ending felt a lot of it like a happy ending. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think it was maybe a little bit abrupt in terms of the narrative arc and the kind of problem, as you see that, with every single film, you have some sort of problem that you kind of, I guess, resolve towards the end. It felt like that wasn't strong enough to kind of push me into a different state of being emotionally at the end. And again, I thought that was a bit of a shame because it was done so beautifully, as Maddie was saying, especially visually, it's just so, elegant and nice. So those are kind of my two main points. And also in terms of the relationship between Nicholas and Max, as you said, beautifully constructed, but I thought that there wasn't much kind of justification for maybe Nicholas or for why he was the way he was with Max, and why he was just kind of so forgiving and kind of, and in a way you kind of think, well, that doesn't really matter, because if, maybe they just really have a connection, and it just goes to show what the kind of maturity of their relationship is, that Nicholas is so kind of willing to be like, you do whatever you do, you write your book type of thing. But it almost felt like there was so much emphasis on Max that Nicholas just felt like this kind of person that kind of came out of nowhere and then just wasn't started to push us towards the end of the film so that Max could have his kind of happy ending, if that makes sense. So just a few kind of bits in terms of the narrative and the way that it was done that I wasn't completely like taken with.
Yeah, I mean, I would like I have no connection to the literary world of London, so I cannot speak to the, its authenticity, but I did live in New York, and then there was a similar sense of like being an artist, being someone who has to grapple with the cost of living, but also the arrogance of certain kind of worlds. And I've certainly went to a few book parties and things like that. So I didn't really feel that was completely off in of how I would envision the book and publishing world of London. But I think what Rosie was saying too, I just think with the fact that this was an intergenerational relationship where there was something that I think maybe I just really liked Jonathan Hyde playing that character. I think he did such a great job. I just really bought into it, and I just felt like what he needed from Rory, or sorry, from Max, he got, and he was just much more yeah, empathetic, and like it was a real relationship where some of the other characters, yeah, we're using, what we're using Max in a way that was just really harsh to see. So it was, yeah, I mean, I thought that for me, I bought it, and I think Miko will talk about some of the casting decisions and stuff in our interview later, but I think for me that worked. But yeah, maybe it was just I was taken away by how pretty it was, so I just bought into it versus maybe other films we'll talk about later.
I think sometimes with that sort of thing, maybe it makes a difference if you see it in the cinema compared to when you see it on a
Yeah.
laptop, with a tiny screen. That kind of immersion, I think, is just sometimes it doesn't manage to kind of translate the same way compared to when you're in the darker cinema. And I think, again, the ambience of that film will work so well in the dark cinema
Yeah.
because of the way it's been
Yeah.
shot. So
Yeah, I think the last thing that really struck me about the film was sort of how meta it was actually. When I was doing like my background research and things to interview Miko, I came across a spread in Wonderland. Rui was he was nominated for a BIFA for this performance. And it was a spread that was him and the other nominees, these like up and coming actors, and it was exactly like the one that Max appears in the film when he's an up and coming writer. It was like the parallel was so interesting. And I think Ruri Malika is definitely an actor to watch out for. I think he's
Yeah.
I think he's gonna go places. I mean I read recently he was signed with Marvel. So I feel like he's going to go on and do some really interesting things. So the way that we see Max sort of grappling with being an emerging writer, I feel like that's exactly what Rory is going through just now as an emerging artist.
Yeah. I think it also connected too because it was like like you say meta, but it was like the filmmaker using a a person from Edinburgh with a proper, Edinburgh accent, or,
Yeah.
and that being part of that story. And but yeah, also I would just say the scenes, again, I'm not someone who goes clubbing on a regular basis, so I don't know why this is such an important thing for me, but like night, like these scenes, are always something I say, are they real or not? And I felt they were much more real than the Outrun. I didn't really buy the Outrun like nighttime scenes in London. So I was asking him, which you'll hear in about where they filmed all that sort of stuff. And they did film some of the film in Glasgow. So,
Mhm.
but like this Glasgow for London worked this time for me, and I think in that Outrun particularly, I was not buying the London like scene as much for some reason, but who knows? But anyway, that's Sebastian, and when we come back, we'll be having a quick chat with Mikko Mäkelä, the director. So, all right, and I'm back with Mikko Mäkelä, the director of Sebastian. Mikko, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah.
We really loved your film, and really, wonderful that you were able to come to Scotland as well to do Q&As, and thank you for taking the time to talk about it. I thought it was such an empathetic portrayal of a person who's a sex worker, but also just a beautiful portrayal of a young man, figuring out his identity as well, and learning how to write. And it does make me think a little bit about a lot of films that are focusing on sex workers, like most notably Nora. And I was thinking about the film Pleasure, which was around the porn industry in LA. But why did you decide to make a film about this subject matter in such an empathetic way?
I think, it really started a while ago already. After I moved to London after university, I went to Nottingham University, and moving to London and kind of starting to discover the queer scene, particularly in East London. It sort of slowly dawned on me just how many young gay men were involved in sex work of kind of some kind or another, and this was even before OnlyFans as well. And I guess it kind of struck me a little bit, and I was sort of drawn to the idea of I guess how a lot of people really kind of spoke about it without kind of much shame, and it really seemed to be becoming almost like another option in the city's gig economy in a way. And really it seemed to me that kind of the idea of sex work was really shifting as well, away from kind of really those like older fashioned ideas of what sex work is now, then really enabled and kind of facilitated by digital means, and just the way that people can connect via apps and the internet, and it really seemed seems that's really made the threshold much lower, I think, for people to go into sex work. So I really just wanted to kind of approach that phenomenon of young queer men in London engaging in sex work in that context, and with that kind of looking at sex work as something, as a choice rather than something that is a last resort, which we're so used to, I guess, seeing portrayals of sex work as something that people might be, forced into, or they kind of are going into because of some kind of trauma or something. But really, I wanted to look at it from a non-judgmental point of view as a choice for a character.
I think when you just mentioned that, I think one of the things that really hit me and felt like resonated across all films is this conversation around shame and your body and sex and your double life that maybe you sort of think about. So I wondered if that was, and it came across in the story to me that it was really powerful, and if it was something you thought about in terms of writing the film.
Yeah, in terms of, I think certainly, there's kind of things about, shame around sex work, things that the character is kind of working through in a way. And it's and there's this, while the film definitely wants to be very sex positive and sex work positive, but the character also still has, whilst he kind of also professes to kind of want to be beyond like hang-ups around sex work, he's still kind of coming up against maybe kind of more subconscious feelings of shame that maybe come from an internalized this kind of internalized guilt over some sex work, maybe coming from his upbringing, and also one of the sort of leading questions, I guess, that I really wanted to address with the film, and through that, the idea of the double life, with him being a journalist and an author by day, and then a sex worker at night, was really this idea that I really wanted to ask the question of like, why shouldn't, in the eyes of society, someone be allowed to be a sex worker at the same time without judgment, as they hold another quotation in quotation marks respectable kind of job as well. And I think even within the kind of cultural industry, where of course kind of his publishers, whilst they don't exactly know where the inspiration comes from, they really seem to kind of fetishize the idea of telling authentic sex work stories. I think there is still a kind of hypocrisy, of what would they really think and say if Max was open about what he is doing as Sebastian as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned in other Q&As I've seen about how important authorship was as a subject matter. You as a writer, as a filmmaker, and but also that's the point of Max's sort of journey as well. What are your thoughts in terms of authorship, and why was that such an important thing to be a main part of the story?
Yeah, because I mean, exactly. Beyond wanting to craft this portrait of sex work today, equally important for the film was also, a portrait of a young author, young artist, and really thinking about that relationship between an artist's life and their work, and particularly for someone who is potentially drawing on their life for their work. I wanted to explore the questions of how much lived experience you need to have to be able to write about something authentically, and particularly in today's kind of this day and age, where we do place so much currency on authenticity of voice. Just ask that question of who gets to tell whose stories. And I think for Max, of course, in a sense, with his sort of method writing in a way, takes that idea to an extreme, and I think of course the answer sort of lies somewhere in the middle. I think it's really important, especially with subject matter like his, and particularly when talking about kind of underrepresented characters or marginalized characters, to make sure that there is input from people who actually have that experience. But then certainly storytelling has always also been so much about, for millennia, also about imagination and empathy, and the kind of power to be placed in someone else's shoes, and for a writer to put themselves in someone else's shoes. So I think we also can't lose sight of that dimension to storytelling, or otherwise we'll just end up making documentaries about ourselves.
Apart from getting a glimpse into the world of like London nightlife and the writer's world and sex work, this film is just beautiful in its intimacy of relationships and those relationships that are formed. I just thought the way that sex was portrayed in the film was just quite beautiful, and the way you shot it, the way the different aspects of the intimacy. And I just wanted to ask you how you sort of looked at building those scenes, filming those scenes, and why it was important to you.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I always knew that, making a film about sex work, sex would be front and center, and it would be it couldn't be an ellipsis in any way, and that all the sex scenes would be important to the story, and that's why they were already very detailed in the script, because as I was writing them, I really didn't kind of feel in any way think, oh, now I'm writing a sex scene. It was just just recounting the character's journey, and a lot of it means encountering different kinds of people, different clients, and just kind of observing and understanding how he reacts to each situation, and how he might be provoked to feel in different ways, and what it kind of does to his character journey. So they're really I really viewed them as kind of on the page. I really viewed them in the same way as any other scene. And there is a kind of you could say that's like there's almost a kind of wordless dialogue going on as well, between sex worker and client in that sense, and I think sometimes sex is kind of underused maybe as a communicative tool as well in cinema. But then just kind of practically approaching the scenes. We worked with an intimacy coordinator, who was really wonderful in kind of enabling that sort of or like really quickly building trust between the actors. There were sex scenes with a number of supporting characters who might have been on the set for just a day or two, so they were really helpful in being able to kind of bring Rory and the other actors into a very comfortable space very quickly. The way that I like to visually approach sex scenes, I think it's really about kind of crafting an intimate atmosphere, I suppose. I mean, I like to shoot them fairly close up, and really kind of focusing on kind of more on faces, and on touch, and kind of the idea of sensation, rather than crafting big tableaus, or and really trying to kind of ground the viewer, I suppose, in the protagonist's perspective, and kind of make them feel part of the moment.
Yeah, and it really was. I think again, I heard that someone else mentioned this, but I think the chemistry between Jonathan and Rory and those scenes was really beautiful. So it was that mixture between the actors and the performances, and the way it was filmed, that it was really a wonderful. How did you come to the casting I guess those main characters, and then obviously the many others that were in the film as well?
Yeah, so I knew, kind of starting with Rory, starting from Max Sebastian, I knew that I wanted to find someone who would be new to the audience, and it's such a journey of self-discovery, and I wanted the audience also to go on this journey of discovering who this person is, and really kind of starting from kind of tabula rasa in a way at the beginning of the film. So yeah, we worked with a casting director, Martin Ware, and did a fairly sort of traditional search, getting tapes in from around the country, from up and coming actors, and had a few rounds of auditions, but there was really something from that very first tape that I saw of Rory that just really struck me with kind of this intensity and the kind of quality of the energy that he had, that, already gave me a hunch that, he might be the right person. And then, with Jonathan Hyde, that was a um quite a challenging role to cast, in the sense that, it's such an important relationship in the film, and I knew that, like, it's, it had to be perfect. um and it's also, it is also quite a challenging role, and I think, particularly as well for someone of kind of his generation as well. Like, it is it's a it takes quite a brave actor to kind of want to do it. But we had a chemistry read with Rory and Jonathan, and again, it was immediately obvious that he was Nicholas.
I also really liked that Rory. Well, I mean, obviously we live in Edinburgh, so it's nice to see the Edinburgh and the authentic Edinburgh accent as well. But yeah, it's very much about a person coming to a city like London, and someone who lived in New York for 14 years. So the feeling of knowing and coming, being a young person, and sort of exploring. So London is very much the backdrop of this story, the nightlife, like I said, the writers sort of world that's also quite intimidating as well. Why London? I mean, you mentioned biographically your connection to London, but why was London an important setting for you?
Well, I mean, I like it, I think it really comes from it, that the story really kind of arose from London in particular, and that city. It's interesting. I guess in many ways, the way that I'm depicting London as well, kind of in terms of is kind of the professional world, and how it's also this city where, I don't know, kind of ambitious people, that from around the world come to this city to kind of try to make it, in that sense. So in a very similar way to New York as well, and that's kind of how it is depicted. But yeah, I really wanted to be very, I guess, faithful to also my experience of the city, and it was really and there are lots and lots of like kind of quite a few places, locations, and vistas that were really important to try to include in the film. And I think there's also kind of I suppose talking about the alienation as well in a big city as well. That's something maybe quite particular to a city like London or New York. And also kind of thinking about how people do exist within the gig economy, especially for a 20-something like Max, who is really kind of still very much looking for themselves and looking for their identity and their voice. And I also wanted to capture the kind of transit within the city, and we have scenes on the underground, and kind of capture the feel of really of what it feels like to live in a city like that.
And you definitely had this nice delicate balance of the film really interrogating this gig economy, which as anyone who moves to these cities and it doesn't come from necessarily a very wealthy background experience as an artist, but also really elegantly portraying the scenes. And it's just a very elegant film for me, and it's just absolutely beautiful. I know you worked with your DOP on both your previous film, right, and this, and so you have sort of a relationship across multiple films.
Yeah, we definitely have a shorthand, and like, I always knew that I wanted to shoot the film with him. I think we've developed a a really nice kind of language together as well around capturing intimacy, and here kind of compared to the first film, which was mostly like all handheld. Here we kind of wanted to I wanted to depart from that a little bit and kind of combine a very that kind of very intimate and raw feeling of a kind of a more verite cinematography than with also more controlled and kind of composed shots as well, and kind of building this language language which that is kind of in a sense trying to alternate the idea of the first person and the third person, almost as if at times Max the writer is kind of distanced from himself and like sort of observing Sebastian as his character and kind of trying to bring some of that into the visual language as well.
Your film premiered at Sundance, but has been going around the rounds in terms of different festivals, and now it has its UK distribution. Where else is the film going, and what's the rest of the path for the film?
Well, I think now, yes, as you mentioned, yeah. So it premiered at Sundance last year. So it's been quite a journey over these last 15 years, really, taking it around the world and it being released. It's released in the US last year, and it's being released around the world, and we've been, I think, on like four different continents, like screening at a festival. So it's been really exciting to see the different reactions in different countries as well, and also really observe, like, whilst kind of observing differences of reception, but also I think a lot of the themes around, well, certainly around kind of quite a globalized queer culture nowadays. People can relate to that around the world. And kind of at the base of it is a coming of age story really as well. So that's it's been nice to see kind of how universally people can relate to that. But yeah, it's a little bit funny in the sense that whilst it is a UK film and a London film, and a Scottish film as well. As we shot in Glasgow for 2.5 weeks as well during
Oh, wow.
during doing interiors. But that it should only be, that is now finally coming to the UK after all this time, which it is the sort of home audience for it. So that's been wonderful to finally get to share it in the UK.
Are you working on any upcoming projects as well?
Yes, there are a few things that I'm sort of cycling between a little bit, and I am so I'm developing a series based on a novel by a Finnish Kosovar author by Tim Statowski, which is a kind of period queer love story, and also working on some original new ideas at the moment as well. But yeah, it's been so focused on the release of the film over the last months that yes, that is what I'm looking forward to as well. Kind of beyond the release is delving into something new for sure.
There's such a huge long life to a film, and to really revel in the in the distribution and its sort of take across the world. So I was absolutely delighted to see this film, and really moved me, and just really appreciate your time talking to us about the film today, and really looking forward to seeing future work from you as well. So
thank you. It's been a pleasure talking about it. Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful.
So it's playing in cinemas. It was released on the 4th of April. So try to catch it as soon as possible. It's the vagaries of kind of independent film distribution in the UK mean that it might not play for that long. So it's try to catch it while you can. And then it'll be out on DVD and Blu-ray and digital at some point down the line as well.
Bye.
Bye.
keeps turning up at wakes for people she doesn't even know. Oh my God, there's Simon.
He looks wrecked.
Hi.
Good morning, Edward.
Oh my God, she speaks.
If you were going any slower, we would go back in time.
Why do you keep pointing at every turn?
Why are you in therapy?
I don't know, Mom. Okay, I'm a writer. I'm neurotic.
Repeat after me. I'm going to stop.
Taking care of other people and start taking care of myself. Hello?
Hi, Edward. We've decided to run away to Maspaloma's Pride for 3 days and leave our mums with you. Sorry.
Who abandons their mothers to go to Maspaloma's Pride of all things?
My son has abandoned me with strangers.
None of us asked to be here in the first place, you know.
I'm gonna have to bring a sleeping bag in here.
Well, where am I going to sleep?
This can only happen to you.
This is the universe taking a shit on me.
Edward, you can't cope.
Mom, we're gonna have to make this work.
We can do it together.
All right, so the next film we're going to review is For Mothers, which is currently out in UK cinemas at the moment. And Kat, tell us about this film.
Sure. So this one is directed by Darren Thornton. So Edward, who's played by James McArdle, is a Dublin novelist. He's currently caring for his mother, Alma, who's played by Fionnuala Flanagan, who suffered a stroke and is unable to talk. Instead, she uses a kind of speech tool to communicate. When Edward's friends, who also take care of their elderly mothers, decide to take off to Spain for a Pride event, Edward is left caring for them mothers as well as Alma and their eccentricities. In the meantime, his latest novel is taking off online, and Edward faces a tough dilemma of whether to go on a demanding tour in the US to promote his book or stay at home and continue caring for his mother. So very kind of simple premise. It's actually based on an Italian film from 2008 called Mid-August Lunch. A very kind of beautifully Irish film. What did you think, Amanda and Rosie?
Sure. So I did really like this film. I did have some reservations about it. I think it's a lovely, sweet film. I think there's some really humorous moments in it. Interestingly, although they're very different films, there's a few parallels with Sebastian. The film opens, For Mothers opens with Edward, the writer. He's sort of rehearsing what he's going to say that his novel's about, and he's trying to kind of put it into words. And similarly with Sebastian, that film opens with someone asking Sebastian, like, tell me a bit about yourself, and he's trying to sort of articulate who he is and trying to sort of brand himself almost. And both films are about queer writers and how you sort of brand yourself as a queer writer in this day and age when, you know, LGBT issues are quite zeitgeisty. There's definitely some interesting themes, some tender moments. I think my main reservation was with how the film looked overall. I thought it looked just quite flat and quite beige. That was my main reservation with it. But I thought James McArdle was really good. I think he does like a really good performance in this, and he kind of reminded me a bit of Chris O'Dowd maybe. Like quite funny, but also has quite like lovely like sincere moments as well. And his relationship with his elderly mother is something really nice. But I think as well when I was watching it, I was trying to ask myself like who this film was made for. Because as much as there's certainly some queer themes in the film and it centers around this gay character, I'm not really sure it's made for an LGBT audience. It feels like it's made for a much older audience. And in fact, you know, the story sort of centers around this writer and he's caring for these 4 mothers and who all have gay sons. I feel like it's made much more for the parents of queer kids. Which that's maybe, I don't know if that's an issue. I don't think it is. But that was just a speculation I had. Like for example, there's one scene where he's on a video call to one of his friends who's left to go to Pride, and and his friend is saying to him, "Oh, I think," he says something like, "I think I'm a bear," which is like a very well known term in the gay male community. And then he explains what a bear is, even though nobody in that scene no one needs to know an explanation for that term. So that's what made me think it was made more for uh perhaps not an LGBT audience, but maybe, I don't know, allies, supporters. Um, I feel like when I saw that scene, I could just see a sort of a red pen on the script, just being like, "Bear, please explain."
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is such a good point, and I think that I think that's where I had real strong issues with this film, where I wanted to like it. Perhaps it was like along the lines of I was thinking a little bit when I saw the first couple scenes, I didn't know much about the film. I just knew it was Irish, to be honest. But then I sort of felt like, oh, this is trying to be like Full Monty or like Pride, this sort of feel good, like film. Um, and I just didn't I just that I felt like it was really inauthentic in lots of places in terms of the writing. Maybe it's just again, it's what a little bit of Kat saying, like I didn't buy the world of publishing, but I just didn't buy why these sons would drop their mothers off at this at their friend's house and so the actual whole way this film was like the narrative was like the frustration was just didn't feel like just not working for me. Like I just can't get past that. And then all of the things that he was struggling with was not it just felt really inauthentic to me. Like I certainly understand the feeling of anxiety and getting on interviews and all this sort of stuff. But like the whole thing just felt really, really staged. And it was like someone was trying, maybe it's again seen as BFI on the front, like you said, like what was this film made for? Like it was trying to be a more broader interest film that you would see, on BBC Player, like on a Sunday or something like that. And it just didn't work for me. But it wasn't bad, but I was having trouble getting through this film, to be honest, and I wanted to like it because I love lovely stories of Irish towns, and I don't know. So, Kat, what did you think?
Laughing because there were so many things that you say that I was like, yeah, I did note that down. And, like, I think as I was watching it in the first 20 minutes, I was like, it just feels like a BBC intern made this film. And this is such a horrible, like, it's such a disservice to the people who made this film to say that out loud. But it's honestly the kind of vibe that I was getting because of all those things they already mentioned. So the way that it looks, the way that it's set up, and as you say, Amanda, it is so ridiculously unrealistic. These people would just leave the elderly mothers with this person who is apparently dealing with anxiety, is like about to, like potentially promoting their book, which is a huge like demand. The taking of the elderly mother who like can't move really by herself, she can't speak, and so she needs like 24/7 care. And I'm like, who in their right mind would do that? Like it's just so, and so from there on, it's very difficult to kind of bring it, but kind of come back to earth and kind of see this film for and what it's maybe trying to do. And then some of the other scenes, they kind of try to push it in different directions. They go to this medium, is that right? Somehow the main character, Edward, is pushed into taking everyone to this medium. And then just turns into this kind of gimmicky comedy bit, which doesn't really work. And so you kind of, and so where there are those moments of tenderness where you expect the kind of, bittersweet, sad type of thing to come in, you can't take it seriously because the setup of the film just doesn't really put you there in the first place in that, frame of mind. Yeah, so as you said, Amanda, like really tried my hardest, but thankfully it's not the longest of films. I think it's an hour and a half. So you kind of, yeah, but it's just really, really unconvincing, unfortunately. And then again with the ending, it's a bit like, oh well, good, good for Edward. Like he's managed, he got his cake and he managed to eat it as well. Like well done. You're just like, okay, whatever. Like I just don't care at that point.
Yeah, it was just good. You're right about the ending. It's just very much like, oh, that was resolved and now he's fine. Living his dream in the big city. Yeah, and I think as well, talking about like the way that the film looked, and I agree, it felt like it was it felt and looked like it was maybe made. It could have worked as like a sort of mini series for Channel 4 or like say BBC or something. But I think unfortunately that look also bled into the marketing behind it as well, because like the poster wasn't particularly compelling, and the sort of stills that were kind of going around of it as well, I thought were just really bland, and there was nothing really like drawing me into to watch that film, other than that, you know, it played at GFF and I'd heard from people who saw it there that it was good. So yeah, I think it just the overall look for me was probably my biggest problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, even the look didn't. I totally think the look gave you an impression of what the film was going to be, and then it didn't. It didn't give us that film, and it didn't give us another film that we wanted to see either. So it's a shame, because maybe your hypothesis of what you said, Rosie, in terms of you know, the red line jokes, because I also felt that, where I was like, I felt some of these jokes were forced and didn't feel like, again, authentic. And maybe there's a sad story in, you know, how it was made, that there was a draft that was the film we wanted to see, and it just ended up, you know, getting, you know, redlined too much or something like that. But it's a shame, because it, like I think you said, I think, you know, the performances were not bad. I think we had really captivating characters on screen. I think the idea of lovely ladies help, you know, like being together in a, you know, I mean, I think the concept could have worked in some capacity if there had been like a reason why they all ended up in the same house, you know, apart from three people just dropping their mothers off, you know. That's just, I think I just couldn't get past the whole, like, how this all happened. And, you know, I don't mind a road movie and all that stuff, but it's like they threw all these gimmicky sort of things into the film that are like, audiences like this, you know, throw it all in there and we'll, you know, it'll be cute, and it'll, you know, it'll be the next Pride. But no, it did not end up that way.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to say, there are, like I said, there's similar themes to Sebastian, but Sebastian is a film that you can tell has been made by and for a queer audience. Whereas this film is sort of the opposite. I don't know. I'm just not convinced it was made with LGBT audiences in mind, but it sort of minds those themes, and even you know, Edward's written a YA novel about a gay romance, and it sort of comments on the fact that that's sort of zeitgeisty and that's what young people want to read. But I feel like the film itself is sort of, yeah, like trying to hop on that a little bit, but I'm not convinced that it's actually had LGBT audiences in mind, to be honest.
And also the fact that it was based on a different film, I wonder if it, you know, maybe that's why it doesn't quite work. It's kind of like it's been lifted, and I've not seen the original Mid-August Lunch. I don't know if any of you have, but I did see the trailer, and it looked like, you know, set in a kind of small Italian village, and it's kind of, you can see how that would work there with a kind of different temperament, you know, built into that story. So maybe when you lift that and just plop it onto something else, it doesn't quite, with the right considerations. And I think, as you say, Rosie, I think it's really clear that it's almost like there's like people undecided what this is meant to be. And it's like, is it meant to be about mental health? Is it meant to be about the fact that these guys are queer? Is it meant to be about caring responsibilities and, you know, how that's difficult? And obviously it's completely fine for it to be about all of those things. Like, that's what you want to see, but not in a way where you're like, I don't really know what you're saying, you know, like kind of being frustrated with the fact that it's just not really working well. So yeah, I think you're right.
Well, that's For Mothers, and it's currently out. Not a total win on our team here, but you can check it out in cinemas right now.
When I walk into the club, there's a solitude to it that I like.
It's the legendary Carl Craig.
It's hearing the music bounce from the wall back to me.
Are you proud to be from Detroit?
Almost seemed like I could feel the ground shake.
Hell yeah! I'm proud to be from Detroit.
Okay, Carl Craig, come here, man.
When you enter his world, this is really something very exceptional.
Hello. I used to work doing Xerox copies. We had 3 of them, I think. One would do his rhythm. The other one's going, but they're not going in sync with each other. It's like.
But to him, it was music.
So when I would go home, and I'm not even thinking of that, I heard these rhythms all day long. I'm just making rhythms and stuff.
It wasn't house or techno.
There were jazz elements.
It's a sound that's utterly unique.
And it was so emotional.
So otherworldly.
I didn't like the concept that I had to follow the rules. With jazz, it gave me the idea that made my electronic music feel more human.
And that's when he knew it's gonna be huge.
Okay, so the last film we're going to review is Desire, the Carl Craig story. And as the name suggests, Carl Craig is our subject. So it is a documentary about the life of Carl Craig, the famous techno producer, DJ, record label creator. And it goes through a little bit of his background. It goes through his current work. It goes through things that he struggles with as he remains a really well-known DJ. It takes you through, why his music is so important to the whole music world now. And I think just sort of an overview of different things about his life and the music that the really great music that he has created over decades. I'll ask you both what you think about the film. So, Kat, what did you think?
So I didn't know. I keep wanting to say Craig Charles as well, and it's not Craig Charles, it's Carl Craig. But yeah, didn't know anything about him. As a music lover, I'm always happy to find out more about people like this. What I thought was really interesting, just from kind of a music perspective, was that his techno music isn't what you think it is. There's a lot of jazz influences and a bit of, I think it's kind of, to me, it sounds like slow jungle and drum and bass kind of cross. So it's much slower than what you would expect, but it's really nice, especially the kind of early 60s stuff. But yeah, I thought it was quite interesting, especially the kind of first half of the documentary, especially kind of going through his kind of journey and how, what his legacy is about, how his music kind of, became big-ish, I guess, bigger in the US and in the UK as well. Yeah, those are kind of my initial thoughts. I thought after the first half, it declined a little bit in terms of what it was maybe trying to say. But we can maybe get onto that. Rosie, what did you think?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. So I went into this, I wasn't familiar with his music. I'm a real novice when it comes to techno music. That's not really my cup of tea. But I was pleasantly surprised because I feel like I learned quite a lot, and I went into it with absolutely a blank slate. And I thought the strongest bit was of the documentary is probably when you're finding out about his influences, and that's what I found most interesting. Is someone who doesn't really know anything about techno music and thought it's probably not a genre that I connect with or enjoy. Actually seeing how much influence was coming from jazz and British music and all these other places, even films, he talks about growing up watching sci-fi and The Matrix and stuff like that. I thought that was a really interesting portrait of an artist and the sort of mosaic of influences that goes into someone's art. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, I think I agree with you, Kat. I feel like the first half is really strong, and then it kind of dips towards the end, and they start to explore themes that maybe end up a little bit flimsy. They start to talk a little bit about like racism in America, but I feel like it's not explored very fully. They just sort of move on and start talking about something else. For such a grand topic, I just thought they moved on quite quickly, and that I feel like there was a few instances where that happens.
Yeah. I'm with you both. Probably maybe slightly more in like this even near the end. Just because I think I was similar to you, Rosie. I was pleasantly surprised. I've seen way too many biopics, and so my assumption is biopic documentary sort of films that this is going to be that same film, and you can't do much different than that. And I've obviously I think Kevin McDonald does a really interesting, like a portrayal of famous people, and I think there are filmmakers who really do great, great sort of uh picture, the things about people's lives. But it is a very like it's a subject that Netflix attacks, like or interrogates all the time. So I wasn't expecting much, but I really did like it, and I do have a weird fascination for this like mixture between the house and techno world and how it ended up in the UK. And I just think I'm not an expert at all on any of this, but I love this kind of film. So like I was intrigued and really interested in him taking you kind of back to those early roots of Detroit techno and learning about that, but also how somebody how his background and how he sort of found that, like, creating that sort of voice. And I love how they said he could make synthesizers cry, and that you can actually sort of see that within the footage. And so there isn't much, archive footage, I think, from, because I've watched a lot of films about this early stage of house and techno music, and I don't think there's much archive of what was happening, because it was happening and there, people weren't filming it. It was so it's interesting to see how filmmakers deal with the lack of visuals and how they make that work, and how they make it a modern story, but also a story that talks about, the past. And I think it did a good job. I also thought it was really fascinating to sort of see his relationship with his mom and his dad, and sort of and how that, and his and clearly his background in the church and whatnot, and how that kind of informed some of the like you mentioned, to sort of, what he was watching, and at certain periods and whatnot, but that how that sort of informed this new type of music that they were creating. So it was really interesting to see that generation of that. But I thought it was also really well shot, and it could have been a lot worse, let's just say. Like, it wasn't breaking bounds of documentary filmmaking and shifting the genre and all these sort of things that we love to talk about with doc, but it was interesting, and a really interesting person. So I'm clearly, my Spotify list is all Carl Craig at the moment. So
It's so funny when you said that you thought he was quite an interesting person, because again, I've got, and it must have been the week that I've been having, but I have in my notes that I just think that maybe he's just a bit of a dull person. Like, I think the music stuff is really interesting, but I think what I got from the documentary, and it's almost like maybe that's my theory in terms of why it kind of dips in the second part, is that, and Rosie already kind of hinted at this already, that there's like, they kind of talk about racism for a bit, and then they kind of like, oh well, moving on. They also talk about the kind of mental and physical kind of come down that he's got from doing these like DJ sets and stuff, and how he's got, he's developed tinnitus over the years, and how that kind of become difficult and all that stuff. But you kind of think, okay, and so what? Like, is this, it's kind of like they try to construct it as this like, oh, this struggle that this person has gone through, but despite of all of this, they've become this big star. And I'm like, "Huh? Is this really the case?" It seems like it's like he started making music, he became quite popular, and he still is quite popular. And like, that's the story. There's not much else to be told. And so even I think the way that he talks about his life, he seems like he's not a particularly great storyteller. Like when he starts talking, I'm just like, oh, I just lose my interest. So I wonder if the documentary was kind of maybe struggling to kind of pull out a story that would really kind of work. And so you have these like loose strands that you kind of think that maybe there's something there, but there isn't really. Um, but even I think despite of that, it wasn't like I found myself being really interested in the kind of music that was being made at the time. So I think overall it kind of worked, but it's just interesting that I think he's quite a reserved person, kind of like almost like an introvert. He's seen alone a lot of the time. Like any kind of interactions that he's got with, other like fellow musicians or even like his family, it almost feels a bit like staged or a bit forced. And I think maybe that's because he seems really in his element when he's doing the music, and that's like, that's what he wants to crack on with that. Anything else, it just seems like he's not particularly interested in that, or he's not like a celebrity that would go into and be like, let me tell you a story about like when I was growing up, this and that happened. So I think it's interesting that I felt a bit of a tension in that, in the way that he is, and the way that the documentary was trying to tell a story about him. But I think that makes it that much more interesting. So yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think definitely, like I said before, the strongest area is when I think they're talking about his influences and how his music is made, and it is a sort of mosaic of influences over different types of media. Like, I think the part that made me sort of sit up and think that's interesting, where's this going to go, is when he's talking about one of his early jobs in like a Xerox copy place, and he's talking about like the sounds of the machines and how that really like influenced him. And I thought that's really interesting. That's like a daily noise, something like repetitive and is part of your regular working job. I think those are like the kind of strongest points. And then, like you say, Kat, that there's different things that are sort of like picked up and dropped. And I do think it is less interesting towards the end. But despite that, I think, if you're a fan of his music, or even if you're just generally a fan of music documentaries, I would highly recommend watching it because it is really interesting. I don't know how widely it's been screened. I know that there's a screening at the GFT on the 8th of May with a recorded Q&A with the filmmakers. So I think if you want to see it on a big screen, it would definitely be worthwhile watching it in the cinema.
Yeah, I think it premiered at Tribeca, I believe, last year, and it was in the Glasgow Film Festival in February. So it's not coming out till the 8th of May, and it isn't. I don't know how widely it's screened. I do know it's been distributed by Sovereign, who are friends of ours, but I think it could have. It's too bad that it's not being screened a bit more, because I do think it has a huge audience in the UK, and I believe Carl Craig does as well, much more than we all knew much about his work. I think Kat, you're meant to, I think that is an interesting point, and again, now on reflection, I do agree with you that he might be. I wouldn't have even said he was reserved, but it was there was a bit of a dialogue between the filmmaker bringing this story out and what you got from him in his interviews. And I think that is a really interesting thing to see. But again, I think as someone who is a documentary filmmaker, and when you were wrestling with that sort of struggle, I think it was overcome to a certain extent overall, which makes me appreciate the filmmaker a lot, because you can end up with a really, really vivacious, interesting character. And I think of things like, again, Kevin McDonald getting, John Galliano, who as a really controversial figure, but it's very interesting on screen. So it's very easy to kind of be on top of him and sort of deal with this thing. But the other thing is that, like you said, that his story is, oh yeah, he wasn't famous and now he is. And so for me, I think, again, going back to this, watching a lot of music documentaries, I think it did handle that loneliness of someone who is now he's famous, now he's asked to do all this work and travel, and it seems like a really hot, amazing, cool life, because he's got to bring this party every night. But really, in the end, it's like, all right, I'm in Miami, Florida, like in this random club, and then I now have to like have a burger, and and my ears are ringing for 5 hours because I've been in these clubs for like 30 years.
Yeah.
And I thought that at least was just a slice of life that I don't know anything about. So I thought it kept me interested. But yeah, overall, good points and yeah, not perfect, but an interesting film enough if you're interested at all in music. And like you said, Rosie, just if you like music documentaries, it's definitely worth a listen, a watch and a listen. That's Desire, the Carl Craig story. And check it out on May 8th. It comes out in UK cinemas. All right, so that's our show this month, and a huge thanks to Kat and Rosie for joining, and taking a little bit of your time out of a sunny day to talk films. Any particular films coming up? I think Rosie, you had mentioned the Caravaggio is coming up in a couple weeks. Any other films you want to suggest people should look out for in the cinemas?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing Last Swim this week. It's a coming of age film. I don't really know much else about it. I love coming of age films, so I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, and you saw Holy Cow, which you said you really liked as well. So that's a film.
Yes, I would highly recommend Holy Cow as well. The latest film by Conic. Really lovely French coming of age film as well.
Good. They both sound very good. I'm looking forward to seeing them. And Kat, how about you?
I still haven't seen. Is it Mickey 17? Is that the full name of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard mixed reactions. So if it's still out, I would love to go and make the time to go and see it. But yeah, I think that's the only one. Unfortunately, I'm not gonna have the time for it. Yeah.
I don't know what this Penguin Lessons is about, but I keep
Oh God. Do you know what? I'm pretty sure there's a French film with a penguin in it, and I was on a plane to Canada over what was it, Christmas, and somebody was watching it, and it looked like the most boring film ever. And I think it was with Jean Reno, I want to say. Is that right? So when this came out, I was like, that couldn't be like, what's that? And again, that's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah. Well, if you're anywhere near Dundee and on the 25th of April, we're showing Kim's Video there. So if you want to check out that film as well, then you should check it on our website. We have tour dates. So we're going to be in Dundee and Montrose and Cromarty. So lots of places in Scotland and also across the UK. So I'm looking forward to that and sharing that film. And yeah, we also have the White House Effect on the 21st of April, which is our new doc screening at the Cameo, which is really timely right now. But it's a really interesting film about using archive to really demonstrate the history of the climate crisis. So that film is happening as well. So I'm looking forward to those, and definitely looking forward to the films that you both mentioned. Well, I saw Mickey 17, Kat, but I'm looking forward to the films you mentioned, Rosie. And so looking forward to seeing you all in the future. So thanks again for joining.
Thanks so much. Lovely. Thank you so much.